G'day everyone, it's Bo from GrowthWise. In this video, I'm going to be briefly talking about the tools that you see on the screen, Xero, N8N, Twilio, and VAPI, and I'm going to show you a workflow that we've set up that will grab an overdue invoice out of Xero, grab a contact number, and then use a voice agent to call someone and remind them that they have an overdue invoice. First of all, let's start off in N8N. If you do not know what N8N is, it's very similar to, say, make.com or Zapier. We're using it because it is something you can actually set up for free yourself, and we just wanted to get familiar with some of the different workflows that we may be able to do. So once you actually get into the workflow screen of N8N, you can click a plus button and it will guide you through the different nodes and the different triggers and things that are available. The nodes are basically what you can see on the screen here. So the Xero logo, the little edit button, that's everything that we've got set up as part of this workflow. Now, if you wanted to build out the workflow yourself in N8N, you would come to a blank canvas rather than having everything pre-configured like we do. And you can click on the plus button, and then you can find the nodes that you want to actually add in. So say, for example, if I want the Xero node, I can just type Xero, click on Xero. It'll give me these different options that are available in the Xero node. And then once I click on this, I can configure everything. If I jump out of it, you can see now, you'll get an X if it's not connected to anything, but you can double click on this to go back in, change it, configure it the way that you want. So if you do want to try out N8N yourself, that would be how you would start a workflow. Now that brief tutorial is out of the way, let's talk through the way that we've actually got this set up. So the first thing where it says set VAPI config, if I double click on it, we're defining our assistant ID and our phone number ID. The reason we're doing it like this is it means that later, if we need these values, we can just pick them up from here. So I'll show you how that works. If you did want to rename this, all you need to do is just click up here and you can rename whatever the node is that you want it to be called something so that's more familiar to you later. The next step that we have is we're going to use the Xero connector. We're going to connect to the Xero demo account. We're looking at the invoice resource and we want to get multiple. And then we can see down here, we've actually got a filter that says that we want accounts receivable only. The amount due needs to be greater than 0. So this can be important if you want to say, you know, we don't want to chase people that have a debt that's below, say, $50. You can change that amount due figure. And then we've also got at the end, the due date and time needs to be less than today. So basically it needs to be overdue when we do this. So that's the criteria that we're going to do. And in N8N, one of the really good things is once you actually set this up, you can click on execute step and you can test it and see what the output is. So let's click on this and we can see we've got 3 items that have come out. So it's good. So there's only 3 items that are overdue. Since we know that step's working, we can move on to the next step. And what we're using is edit fields. So I'm just going to double click on this and you'll be able to sort of see what's going on. So the left-hand side is all of the data that we get returned from the previous step. Now, we don't need to have absolutely everything from that response. So what we're doing is we're saying the fields that we need are amount due, contact name, invoice number, and then the due date. You can add additional things. So say, for example, I could click add field here, and then let's scroll and have a quick look. Say if we want the description to be passed on to the next set of fields later, we can do that here. So we'll just say description, and then that is then available to the next step if we need to. We don't actually need it, so I'm just going to click delete and then it will remove it. In N8N, you don't have to save things as you go at this point. You can just click out of it. You can click save up here though to save your workflow as you're moving along. Moving along now, let's talk about get a contact. So if I double click on this, we can see we've still got the Xero node, but the resource we're using now is contact and not invoice. We're using a get operation from the demo company. And what we can actually do, where you can see here, it says get many invoices and then the contact ID. So from our prior node, we can actually grab the contact ID and just drag and drop it into here. And then what will happen is N8N, when it processes the data for each contact ID, it will get a contact. So you can see on the right-hand side here, we found City Limousines and all of their details. The next 2 things that I'll talk about is limit and then get agent. So if we double click on limit, we can see we've got a limit of 1. This just means that it's going to be limited to processing 1 result. Really important when you're testing. If you've got, say, a result set of 1,000, you don't necessarily want to go and spawn 1,000 calls out to people until you know it's working the way that you would like it to work. The next thing that we have is get agent. So this is doing a API call to VAPI to get our agent details that we've set up. And I'll show you that a little bit later in the video. But if we double click on this, we can see that we're actually using the get method and we're calling out to the assistant API. And then we've got the details that we had from earlier from when we set the VAPI API data. So if I say execute previous nodes here, we can actually look back through. So I'll collapse out limit. We don't need to worry about that. But the VAPI config, if I was to expand that out, we could again drag and drop the details that we need over to here and reuse the information that we had prior. Lastly, we've got get a call. So if I double click on this, you can see that we've got all of the methods set up, and then we've got the configured data down the bottom here as well. So the information that we're going to pass through from the prior nodes. Since we've now demonstrated everything that we were doing in N8N, let's take a look at VAPI. So if we go to the top now, if you were making a new assistant, you would click on assistants, then create an assistant, give it a name, and then you can configure everything here. So with VAPI, you can pick your own AI provider. You do not need to use OpenAI. That's just what we're using for this example. You can pick other ones, and you can also pick the model. So what's good about VAPI is it will actually tell you how long the model is going to take in terms of the data it's going to process. So you can see GPT 4.1 mini, it's 770 milliseconds. So quite a small actual time frame for it to process data. They also give you this graph up the top that shows you where the other amounts of latency are coming from. So we've got a transcription that's going to be behind everything. We've actually got the GPT model that's going to interpret the data. And we've also got a little bit of latency that's going to be introduced by 11 Labs itself. And then we've got network latency as well. So if you're getting things like pausing or sort of things that seem to be taking too long, you can actually look up here at the latency and then tweak this to make it a little bit more effective for yourself. The next part you can set up is where it says first message mode. We're going to set it to assistant waits for user so that when we answer the phone and say hello, it will wait for that before it actually does any response. The first message as well, you can just set it to whatever you like. So we've set it to be hi, it's Barry from Growthwise. Then we're going to move down to the system prompt. So in VAPI, you can click on generate and you can actually say what you want it to do, and it will generate the identity, style, everything that you can see here. The key details that you want for this is what we've got listed here. So the curly brackets that you have around this is actually so that the AI knows from our earlier N8N steps what those values are. So it's actually going to look for this as a variable from what we've passed through to it earlier. If we scroll down a little bit further, you can see we've got the voice configuration. So we're using 11 Labs for this. We can actually pick different voices. So if you don't like the voices, you can come in here and change it quite easily. It's something that I like about VAPI as well. It's just very easy to configure everything. You can configure a transcriber here. If we scroll down, that's basically all we've got set up. Once you've got all of that set, that's kind of your assistant part set up. The next thing that you actually need to look at is your phone numbers. So if we click on phone numbers, if you're in the US, you're really lucky. You can just click on create phone number and you can use a free one for all of this testing. In Australia, we found that Twilio was probably the easiest way to get this working. So we needed to set up a Twilio account. I think it costs $3 for the number. It's very low cost. And then you can actually add the Twilio account into here with the number and everything. And that's going to be the dial out number as well that will be used. So they're the things that you'll need to be set up in VAPI so that you can actually interface with N8N. As I mentioned earlier, if you're using VAPI and you're in the US, you don't need to get a specialized number. You can normally use the ones that they actually provide. But us being in Australia, we needed to actually get a number we could dial out on. So my original plan was to just use our existing VoIP provider, but it turns out that the way that VAPI connects is not currently supported. So we use Twilio instead. So with Twilio, once you're actually in and you've verified your account, you can click on buy a number. It's probably going to default to being US at the start. We can change this over. Let's just say Australia. And then what I'd suggest here is just having a look. Make sure it's got the capabilities you want as well. So you can see SMS or MMS, but you can actually just go through and find a dial out number, then click buy, and it's $3, I think US a month for these. And then you can use that number as your dial out for your assistant. So it's not an incredibly expensive exercise to get this part of it set up. Now that's all out of the way, let's give it a try. So we're going to click on the execute workflow button and you'll see N8N working through everything. We should see a phone call coming in very shortly. There we go. Hello, this is Bo.
Hello, Bo. My name is Barry and I'm contacting you on behalf of Growthwise in relation to an outstanding payment. I'm following up regarding an invoice that appears to be past due. Specifically, this is for invoice number ORC1012 with an amount due of $660. The due date for this invoice was July 30th, 2025. Could you please confirm when you might be able to process this payment, or let me know if there are any issues we can assist with?
There you go. You probably did notice that the call actually automatically terminated. So in VAPI, you can set a setting that says if there's been no input detected in terms of the user actually speaking back to terminate the call. If I had spoken back, the agent would have interpreted what I said and it would have actually gave a response. If you're setting this up for yourself, you do need to take a little bit of time to actually try out different models, different voices, and different system prompts to get it set up in such a way that it's actually appropriate to the tone of your own business, but also so it responds naturally. So one of the things you probably heard going on in the background there was keyboard noise. So that's something that you can also set in VAPI to make the actual phone call seem like it's more legitimate. You can also provide your own background noise as well. So you could record your own office, for example, to make the call seem more legitimate. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to set it all up. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has and you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to our channel if you have not already subscribed. If you're watching on LinkedIn, chuck a comment in the comment section below. Cheers.